Hey guys, Dan here with this week's TV news and reviews. We're actually a week late. I was kind of sick last week, so we didn't do a show, but I did watch all the shows. So they've been in my mind now for about 5 days. So they're not as fresh as they usually are, but we're gonna actually catch up and speed up a little bit. And instead of once a week, it'll be once every like 5 days or so with a new one of these until we catch back up, because there's a lot of shows that have come out in the last 2 weeks that I haven't gotten to cover yet. So tonight we're going to talk about a couple of new HBO shows, The Outsider and The New Pope. We've got Everything's Gonna Be Okay on Freeform. We've got a new Netflix show in the anime vein called Kipo and the Age of Wonderbeasts. We've got a new show on Disney Plus, finally. That's been a few months since we've had something new on Disney Plus. It's called Diary of a Future President. And then we've got a show called 68 Whiskey, a comedy drama about the war, and that is on the Paramount Network. So before we get to all that, we're going to talk some news. The only really news item I want to hit hard this week is the NBC Peacock app, because there's been a lot of news that has come out in the last 2 weeks or so about NBC Peacock. A lot of it came out actually during the Television Critics Association convention or whatever a couple of weeks ago, which we talked about a lot of things that came out of that on last week's show. But now I want to focus specifically on NBC Peacock. So first of all, there's a lot that we know so far about this. Now, it's going to be the last real big one to launch. So we've got obviously Apple Plus and Disney Plus. They launched late last year. And then we've got HBO Max coming soon. And then July 15th is going to be NBC Peacock. Now, if you are part of Xfinity, which I don't know if I am, because I have Xfinity Internet, but I'm a cord cutter, so I don't have cable anymore. I just have like an over-the-antenna network, so I probably don't apply for this. But on April 15th, a full 2 months earlier, Xfinity subscribers will have access to this. So what we know so far about this is there are 3 different tiers of what we're going to see on NBC Peacock. There is the free version, which I'm assuming that means anybody with a smartphone can get it, or probably over the internet as well. I assume. So much of this, streaming stuff is like, here's the app, but I assume you can also do it on a website. But there is going to be 8,000 hours worth of content for that, and that is going to include like next day episodes of shows that were just on, like This Is Us or New Amsterdam or Brooklyn Nine-Nine. That's going to be available the very next day. And then a lot of the catalog stuff is going to be available as well for free with the app. And that to me seems crazy, but if there's a way to kind of get a buzz about stuff, I don't think that will include any of their brand new shows, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. I've already mentioned some in past TV news and review shows. I know, the Saved by the Bell reboot's going to be on there, Punky Brewster reboot, as well as Battlestar Galactica reboot, which I don't think we've talked about yet on the show, but that definitely is a thing that's happening as well. So I don't think any of that stuff is going to be on the free portion of content, but certain shows that have come over from NBC, like AP Bio, which is going to have its 3rd season exclusively on Peacock, that will be available on the free version. So there's that, and of course that will have your regular ads that you would see. Then there is going to be the Peacock Premium, it's called, and there's 2 versions of that. One is the ads for $4.99 a month, which is still cheaper than Hulu, and then there's a no ad version for $9.99 a month, which to me is just not worth it. I don't mind watching ads. I've watched ads my whole life. So I don't mind that. I don't have the ad-supported or the ad-free version of Hulu. I don't have the ad-free version of YouTube. I don't mind the occasional ad if I'm watching a TV show. So I will be doing the $4.99 version of that, but that's going to have the full library of exclusive Peacock series and movies, but it will also cover like everything else, including, I've heard, every Saturday Night Live episode back through 75, which is awesome because a lot of those episodes have been available from either the early years or like the mid 80s on. But there's that like 6 or 7 year period featuring Eddie Murphy for one, but also like Gilbert Gottfried, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Billy Crystal, that is just so hated by Lorne Michaels and everybody at NBC that they just kind of want to brush it under the rug and say that it never happened. So you don't see a lot of those old episodes popping up on, when SNL was on Netflix or when SNL was on Hulu. So here we are finally, I've heard, going to get every episode from 75 forward. Now, I don't know if that includes all the musical guests, because that's a different rights package kind of thing. And also, I don't know if it's going to be the hour-long versions that Comedy Central used to run, because the last time I saw those like early to mid 80s episodes was on Comedy Central, probably 20 years ago, maybe not that long, maybe 15 years ago, but it's been a long time. So I don't know if it's going to be the full unedited episodes or the hour-long versions or whatever. But this is interesting too. If you are a fan of their late night shows, The Tonight Show or Late Night with Seth Meyers, I believe either tier, whether you're doing the ad-supported or the no ads, will get access to those episodes a few hours early. So you watch them on TV at 11:35 and 12:35. On the Peacock app, you can watch Late Night or The Tonight Show rather, with Jimmy Fallon at 8, and Late Night with Seth Meyers at 9. Which to me is a little weird, those specific times, because that's literally NBC primetime hours. But I guess they figure, look, if you're paying for this content, you don't really watch live TV anyway, so here's this early stuff. So I think that's really cool. That's something that we haven't seen from any other platform thus far. So also things that did not originally air on NBC but are NBC produced will be on there, like Murder, She Wrote, for example. And CBS All Access has the same thing because it's owned by Paramount. Any show that was produced by Paramount, like Cheers or Frasier, that is available on the CBS app, even though it aired over on NBC. So the same thing goes here with that. Everything from Law and Order will be available. What else? Keeping Up with the Kardashians, because that's like Bravo, or is that E? Whatever it is, that will be on there. And then, of course, since NBC is owned by Universal, there's over 600 Universal movie titles available from their back catalog, including things like Back to the Future, E.T., Jaws, and Shrek. So that's going to be cool. And then the latest on the new exclusive content shows, there is going to be a bunch of them. Now, some of these are just in the early stages of development. Some of these are going to launch in July when the rest of the Peacock app goes live. So I don't know some of these by name, so I'm going to kind of pass over some of those. But Battlestar Galactica, I mentioned that earlier at the top. It's going to be Mr. Robot creator Sam Ismail delivering the latest version of this. Brave New World, which is going to be based on the dystopian novel. That should be interesting. The Capture is some sort of modern-day spy show. Don't really know much about that yet. Dr. Death, based on a famous podcast about a Dallas neurosurgeon who left a bunch of bodies in his wake. Let's see. One of Us is Lying is in development. Don't know much about that, but it's based on the best-selling novel. Queer as Folk, so they're going to be bringing that back. That's just in development at the moment, so that will not premiere in July with some of these other things, but they're going to be bringing that back, I guess. Okay, so new comedy series, Season 3 of AP Bio, like I mentioned. 5 Bedrooms, Girls, for Girls 5 Ever, which is a one-hit wonder girl group from the 90s, reunites. That is from creator Tina Fey, so that promises to be good. Girls 5 Ever, it's called. Intelligence, which is some sort of The Office UK meets MI5, and that's a comedy. These are all comedies I'm talking about now. Psych 2, Lassie Come Home, which is a movie based on, of course, the TV show, and another, they already did a TV movie, now this is another one. Punky Brewster, I talked about that. Saved by the Bell, we talked about that. The Kids Tonight Show, which is going to be a late-night talk show for kids, by kids. Jimmy Fallon will produce that. Who Wrote That, which is a docuseries shedding light on some of the most famous SNL sketches and who wrote them. And that will be interesting because, I've heard through the grapevine, this was a Conan or this was a Tina Fey, but it'll be interesting, or this was a Buck Henry if we're going way back to the 70s. So it'll be interesting to see some of those. That'll be cool. MacGruber, speaking of SNL, so they had the MacGruber sketches with Will Forte, then they had the MacGruber movie, which I thought was pretty horrible, and now I guess we're going to get a TV series based on that. Could turn out either way, could be great, could be horrible. Let's see, everything else I don't really know anything about. Clean Slate, about transgender son. The Adventure Zone, which is an animated series based on a Dungeons & Dragons podcast. So that's all I really know about that. So that's pretty much what we know right now about Peacock. It seems like there's going to be a lot going on. It's going to be one of those, kind of like, Disney Plus, or really CBS All Access too, where there is a small slate of original content that will be rolled out, as the weeks and months go on. But I think the bulk of people coming to this will probably be looking for some of the past content, once The Office goes off Netflix, for example, and it'll have all the SNLs and 30 Rock and all of that stuff. So, I think for a lot of people it will be more of a, they'll do the free one, depending on what kind of gold content is on there. If not, maybe the ad-supported one for $4.99, so they can get their SVU fix for 22 years or whatever it's been of Law & Order SVU. And I think the new content, the exclusive content, will sort of be more on the sides. Unless you're like a huge Saved by the Bell fan, or, sci-fi fans may check it out for Battlestar Galactica. I mean, they really are trying to give us something for everybody, which I can certainly respect. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. But like I said, I don't think I am eligible for the April 15th launch of the Xfinity stuff, because I am Xfinity through internet only at this point. But I'll be there in July for sure. I will probably pay the $4.99. I might check out what's free first, just kind of as a compare and contrast. But I think after the first few days, if nothing else, so I can review some of the new shows for you guys, I'll do probably the ad-supported at $4.99. So let's move into the review portion of the show. I have 6 shows rather to review for you. And first we're going to talk about the 2 new ones on HBO. I suppose the highest profile is where we'll start first, and that is The New Pope. Now, this is technically a new show, but they had The Young Pope about 4 years ago, and that was a miniseries starring Jude Law. And here we have another miniseries. It is not a season 2 of The Young Pope. It's a totally new kind of thing, but in the same world, in the same universe, and Jude Law is in it, at least sort of. His character is in a coma in the first episode, and actually from, I guess, I never watched The Young Pope, so they did like a previously on. I don't know if he went into the coma at the very end of The Young Pope or not, but in this first episode he is in a coma the whole time, and from what I understand, for most of this series he'll be in a coma. But it's produced by, all the same people that did the 2016 Young Pope. It's going to have 9 episodes total, and it airs on HBO. So we've got Jude Law reprising his role as Pope Pius the 13th, and John Malkovich becomes the new Pope, Pope John Paul III. However, not really until, I guess, the second episode, which I didn't see. So mainly what happens in the first episode is Jude Law's Pope has been in a coma for 9 months, and he's had several heart transplants that have not worked. So he's, kind of out of commission. So they have decided to, okay, we have to elect a new pope here. And so they do, but the one they get, they don't really like, and he's sort of letting the power go to his head. So they strike up a plan to basically kill him and induct one of the other nominees, which was the John Malkovich character. So that's pretty much the plot of episode 1, which is what I watched. And like I said, there's going to be 9 episodes total. So we barely see John Malkovich in this episode, but he is going to be the titular new pope. So he takes over, I guess, in episode 2, and we go from there. I think they've aired 3 now so far. Since, like I said, this podcast is a little bit later than I would have liked it to be, but like I said, I was a bit sick. So I think they've aired 3 now, and there will be another one this weekend. So I sort of like this show. It's a little bit wacky in the sense that it's very, and I guess the Young Pope was sort of the same. So if you saw the Young Pope, you already kind of know the vibe of the show, but it's very like Ryan Murphy-esque. There's club scenes and dance numbers that seem a little bit kind of out of place. It's more of a unique way, I guess, to tell the story. Certainly less straightforward, and that's not always a bad thing, but I don't know. It seems like they may be trying a little too hard to be sort of cheeky or what have you, and Ryan Murphy the thing up. So, I think when it's not doing that, like, for example, since there was, some voting going on in this pilot episode, it moves a little bit slowly because we're just hearing them call the names and all of this for a couple of minutes, and they do that a couple of times in here. So I think it moves a little bit slowly at times and then moves a little too quickly or just sort of too oddly at other times. I think it's kind of cool because it gives Jude Law something to do since his character's in a coma. So instead, we sort of see him in more, I guess, fantasy sequences, if you will. So, it's definitely an interesting take on the whole Pope thing. But I'm not sure how well it comes across in the final package. I think it's a little too scattered to say that it's, a cohesive piece. But I think the acting is pretty decent. But again, and we've talked about this, and I'm going to bring it up again when we talk about The Outsider next. I said in recent weeks that, like, miniseries used to be 2 hours Monday night, 2 hours Tuesday night, or, whatever the nights were, on NBC or CBS. One of the main networks would have this miniseries, and it would be 2, maybe 3 nights. You get 2 hours a night. So it would be like, minus the commercials, it would be like maybe 5 to 6 hours total. But here, what Netflix has done and what HBO is continuing to do is kind of milk this well of like, well, we can do, whatever we want. Time is of the essence. It's our network. We can do what we want. And that's, all fine and good, that they are not as beholden to ratings as NBC or ABC or something. But I think it makes for a slower product sometimes. Like, I don't think some of these things need to be 9 or 10 hours. I felt the same way about Chernobyl when I reviewed the first episode of that. It just, it was good, but it seemed a little slow in parts. So it's unfortunate. But I think that's maybe what we have here. The fact that the new Pope is John Malkovich, and he was barely even in this first episode, tells me that maybe it moves a little bit slower. Maybe we could have introduced the new Pope a little earlier, even by 10 minutes or something, since it is, after all, called The New Pope. I get, the whole plot of the pilot. I understand that. First episode, we need to establish the Pope that really won the election is not very good and sort of high and mighty on himself, and not necessarily even high and mighty on himself, I guess high and mighty on things that maybe the Catholic Church disapproves of, let's say. So so I got it, but for me, it's not something I think I'll revisit. I think if you liked the new Pope, or the young Pope rather, I imagine this is very much in the same vein. For me, it wasn't as cohesive as I would have liked. However, I do enjoy the plot, and I think that the acting is great. But I'm just not sure it knows what it wants to be. So for that, I give the new Pope a B-. Up next is The Outsider, and this is based on a Stephen King book. We are, in the Stephen King renaissance right now, because, of course, between it, chapters 1 and 2, and then we finally had a movie about the Dark Tower. It wasn't such a success, but it came out, and we see a big glut right now of Stephen King stuff. We had Dr. Sleep, late last year. So here we have another HBO miniseries. It will conclude after, I believe, 8 episodes. Or maybe this one's 10 as well. But it stars Jason Bateman, Ben Mendelsohn, Julianne Nicholson, Bill Camp, and a host of others. And Jason, the essential story is there's a child that gets killed, this young boy, and his coach, played by Jason Bateman, is sort of the top suspect, and there's a lot of things, leading to the police thinking that he is the one that did it. He is claiming complete innocence, and there's a lot of evidence that he didn't do it. For example, he was out of town the day that it happened, and there's a videotape of him asking a question at this book conference. So that's where we sort of stand. But did he do it? Is there? I mean, it's Stephen King, so is there some sort of double of his that is going around? We don't know yet. After the first episode, we just are not sure what is going to come of this. So that's basically what's going on. Jason Bateman is directing, I think, at least 4 of the episodes. There are 10 total. And Jason Bateman, we don't know, but he at least directed the first 2. I don't know if he's directing any after that, but he's really come around from being like a goofy actor to between Ozark and now this, and even that movie The Gift, where he was sort of being stalked by the Joel Edgerton character. He has really come into his own as sort of a thriller guy, which is awesome to see. I love that he has this range, because his comedic roles, I love him, but he is very similar in everything. I mean, he was, even as Nick the Fox in Zootopia, he was kind of the same sort of shtick as he is in Horrible Bosses and Arrested Development and all that stuff. But it's great watching him flex his not only thriller muscles, but his directorial muscles. I believe he earned an Emmy just this past year for directing an episode of Ozark, not acting in it. He was nominated for both, but I think he lost the acting one and won the directing one. So it's really cool to see that. I love this dude, and I think this is a very riveting story. Now, again, it's slow. I can tell you right now, just from watching the first episode, it doesn't need to be 10 episodes. Because the first episode alone could have been condensed by about 20 minutes probably, and it wouldn't have, it still would have been as riveting. It's very intense. These cops that are arresting him are his friends, and they're sort of having crisis of faith themselves, and like, do we think this guy did it? Oh, my kid plays soccer too. It could have been my kid that got killed. So there's a lot of talking back and forth between the townspeople about what happened. They come and arrest him at a soccer game, which obviously is a little bit of a I don't know, faux pas or whatever, because it's not like they had a ton of evidence. The guy that comes in as his lawyer is great. There is a lot to like about this show. His wife, by the way, is played by Julianne Nicholson, who I really like. I've liked her since way back in the day. Was she like Ally McBeal? Is that the first time I saw her? I don't know, but she was in August Osage County, which I loved. She's been in a lot of stuff, Boardwalk Empire and Masters of Sex, and she's been doing TV and movies for years. So I'm sure you've probably seen her in something or other. Yeah, she did Ally McBeal for about half a season. So that was the first time I ever saw her, but I love her too. This is very good. It's riveting for sure. I definitely want to find out, what's going to happen with these characters. Did he do it? What's the Stephen King kind of aspect to it? Because you expect some sort of horror or thriller element, or maybe even supernatural element from Stephen King. Not always, though. Sometimes, Stand By Me was Stephen King. Shawshank Redemption was Stephen King. So you never know. But it seems like there's something going on, since people claim that they saw Jason Bateman's character, and yet he was not even in town. So what's the truth? I don't know. But it's certainly interesting, and I will be along for the ride, I think. I'm going to leave The Outsider with a B+. But again, a little bit slow. I can tell you it doesn't need to be 10 episodes long. Up next, we're going to talk about Everything's Gonna Be Okay. This is on Freeform. Freeform is really having some good success lately with some of their originals. The Bold Type is going into season, I think, 4. Grownish just started season 3 and was renewed for season 4, I believe. And then Party of 5, the reboot just started a couple weeks ago. I reviewed that on the last show. Now we have another new Freeform show. It's called Everything's Gonna Be Okay. This is created by and starring Josh Thomas, who I was unfamiliar with. He's an Australian stand-up, and he directed and starred and wrote in the series Please Like Me, which I have heard about, but I have not checked out for myself. So, if you saw that, then you know who I'm talking about. But, I did not know. But anyway, he is mid-20s Australian dude who is home visiting in America and is getting ready to head back to Australia when his father tells him that he's got cancer and he does not have long to live. Can you please care for your sisters, who are really his half-sisters? And he is not sure what to do about that. He's sort of getting his own crap together. In a way, it is sort of Party of 5-ish, but like Party of 3. And so they want him to be the guardian, and he's got his own set of issues. He is gay and trying to sort of make his own way through the world. And then he's got his older of the two sisters. They're both younger than him. They're both in their teens, but the older of the two has autism, and the actress that plays her, Kayla Cromer, is also on the spectrum. So, she was lending some, expertise to the role. And then we've got Genevieve, who is the 14-year-old sister, who is, having her own sort of emo kind of life. She's very angry. Her friends don't really like her that much. She's not all that popular. She just had her first period at 14, so that's late. Everybody's sort of dealing with their own set of issues. And the entire first episode, most of these I think are going to be a half hour, but the first episode was an hour long, which makes sense because it really set the stage for everything. The dad dies, during the first episode. And the autistic sister is the one that gives the eulogy, and so we see a lot of things happen in this hour, which HBO could learn from, quite honestly, because no time is wasted here. Nothing is going by slowly. They hit everything very well, and I don't think anything's rushed either, though. I think everything runs at a good clip, and keeps it interesting. It's certainly funny at times, and heartbreaking at others. I didn't, you know, cry like I think they maybe wanted me to, especially during the funeral scene. And I think sometimes this veers off into the silly territory, but it's certainly heartfelt. I really like these characters. They're all very well defined already, and not just as, gay guy, autistic sister, emo sister. I think each one has many layers to them already in just this first episode. So I'm rooting for this show. Freeform, I think, has found another good hit here after Party of Five, and so I leave Everything's Gonna Be Okay with an A minus. Next, we move to Netflix, to a streaming show. This is an anime show called Kipo and the Age of Wonderbeasts. It is based on a web comic called Kipo from about 5 years ago. And this is produced by DreamWorks and also a South Korean animation studio. So it has that flavor to it, which admittedly is not my favorite thing. I'm not much of an anime person, I gotta be honest. But here's the premise to this anyway. Kipo is a 13-year-old girl who has been living underground because everybody apparently lives underground in a city. And it's post-apocalyptic, but it's not like, zombie outbreak or anything like that. It's we don't really find out, but there's no zombies running around. Let's just say that it's just sort of normal things happening. But everybody did have to flee underground, and so she decides to search for her father after having to flee from her underground city. So she's now above ground and, meets some people along the way named Wolf, Mandu, Benson, and Dave. And if it sounds a little bit like The Wizard of Oz, just on a first glance, that was Seacrest's intent when he did the webcomic, and now as he's doing the show. He, in fact, himself described it as Wizard of Oz, but instead of ruby slippers, Kipo has Converse on, and that sort of gets her by. So I don't really know a lot from the main cast. Kipo herself is played or voiced by Karen Fukuhara, who I don't know, but Dion Cole plays Dave, and I know him from Conan O'Brien's show and Blackish, and then Sterling K. Brown plays Kipo's father, who we don't get to meet in the first episode yet, but I'm sure he'll be along soon. I know some of the side characters. Joan Jett plays a character. Leah Delaria from Orange is the New Black plays a character, John Hodgman. So, but we haven't met a lot of these people yet from that first episode. But of course, it is Netflix, so if you do dig this, you can check out all 10 episodes right now if you want. But I only watched the first one. It's called Burrow Girl, which is where she meets her first couple of friends, Mandu and Wolf. And I think the show is very colorful. That's apparent, as a lot of anime is. It looks kind of like an anime, and it acts like an anime in certain respects, but it's also got this like Into the Spider-Verse type vibe to it, where it's very hip, and it's got a bunch of references, and the soundtrack is pretty cool. So I think it sets itself apart a little bit with that kind of stuff. Certainly it's not super original. I think there's a lot of tropes that are hit on here, but it's likable. I mean, I like this girl Kipo. Again, it's not something that I would be drawn to necessarily. So, am I going to binge all 10 episodes of this? I'm not going to do that. Might I eventually watch all of them? Yeah, I might. I think it's certainly interesting. If it's something that this is something where it's like, if I had friends that were into it and wanted to talk about it, I might watch it. But for just me on my own, probably not. It's very cool. I think it appeals to probably all ages. I mean, I think little kids that are about 7 or 8, I think would enjoy this because it is vibrant, and she's a great lead character, all the way up to adults and grandparents. And I mean, this is something certainly you could watch with your kids, and I think you both might enjoy it for different reasons, but there's nothing, like offensive here. I didn't think the jokes were all that good. I didn't think the humor was that funny. So I wasn't really quite in on that. But I think it's a cute show. I think it's certainly colorful and bright. And yeah, I mean, I think it will be a hit, because I think people that like this type of show will be drawn to it in that respect. It's not my cup of tea, but it is something I can respect, and I certainly enjoyed watching the pilot episode. I don't regret my time for sure. So I'm going to leave Kipo in the Age of Wonderbeasts with a B. Up next, Diary of a Future President. This is on Disney Plus. It's the first new Disney Plus show we've gotten really since Disney Plus came on in November. Was that November? Yeah, like right around Thanksgiving, right? And we did the dump of all the shows, The Mandalorian and the High School Musical show and Encore and Jeff Goldblum and all that. So now they're going to be servicing stuff out much less frequently, because of course the main draw to Disney Plus is that back catalog. So we don't really need to hit everybody over the head with too many brand new shows. But this is one called Diary of a Future President. It is Gina Rodriguez is the executive producer here. She's focusing on this now that Jane the Virgin has run its course. And Disney Plus puts them up every week. So right now there's only 2 episodes up. Although I guess there will be another new one today, because I think it goes up on Fridays. But the premiere is what I watched, and that was Hello World. So basically, in the future, the Gina Rodriguez character is the president, as you might figure out from the name of the show, Diary of the Future President. And her name's Elena. She's from Cuba, but here we see her in the show as a 12-year-old girl. And then Gina Rodriguez is going to do some voiceover stuff. I don't know if there were any in that first episode. Maybe a little bit, and I missed it. But I envision sort of an Everybody Hates Chris type thing, where Chris Rock is doing voiceover for the young Chris. Here, Gina Rodriguez will be doing the voiceover, I guess, through Elena's narration. But at the time, we have little Elena, 12-year-old Elena, who is played by Tess Romero, who I'm not familiar with, but she's a cute little girl, and she's of Cuban descent, and she wants to be president, so she takes her schooling very seriously, and in this first episode, there's a bit about how she loses her schoolwork, but really it's more about her getting her first period, and how she actually doesn't have it yet, but these 2 girls who are sort of mean girls in her class, are bonding over their periods, and Elena finds out that one of them actually is faking it just to bond with the other gal. She hasn't actually gotten her period yet, blah, blah, blah. So if you're thinking, wow, this is a lot of stuff about menstruation for a Disney show for kids, I agree. I thought it was very weird. I mean, like, it made sense when Everything's Gonna Be Okay on Freeform, that I just reviewed, was talking about the 14-year-old girl getting her first period and everything. That's more of a, like, hey, this is real life show. Disney Plus does not seem to be the location for talking about your period in the first episode of a new show. It just seemed really weird. And I'm not weirded out by menstruation or periods, but it would be like, making the focal point of a premiere show on Disney Plus about some kid's wet dreams. It just seemed completely out of place and weird, and I don't know. I understand that there's a lot of PG-13 content on Disney Plus, such as, the Marvel movies and some of the Star Wars movies and stuff like that. But if if my little 6-year-old daughter, let's say, which, I don't have, but if I did and she wanted to watch a show on Disney Plus, I might see this and be like, oh, well, this would be cute for you, little Sally. You can watch Diary of a Future President, this will be cute. And then the entire first episode is about the girl's period. Then I have to answer a bunch of questions. It seemed off-brand for Disney and Disney Channel properties. Obviously, it's not on the Disney Channel, but still, it just seemed a little bit out there for me. The mom, by the way, Elena's mom, is played by Selena's Leva, who was on Orange is the New Black, which I love. So right away I recognize her, and the acting is good. It's kind of a cute show. I think, unfortunately, because it comes on the heels of One Day at a Time, which is of course about Cubans in America trying to get by and all of this, and it really wears its Cuban pride on its sleeve in One Day at a Time. Not that we can't have two shows about Cuban Americans, but it's hard not to compare the two, and One Day at a Time is by far the better show. So, I think that hurts it a little bit too. I didn't dislike this show, but it seems off-brand for Disney. So I'm leaving Diary of a Future President with a B minus. We'll see what happens in future episodes, but I just think it's a bit odd. So finally, we end with 68 Whiskey, and this is a show on the Paramount Network, which apparently exists. And the premiere of this got just under 1 million viewers, so there are people watching this. I think even when I had cable, I didn't have Paramount Network, or maybe it wasn't a network at the time, I don't know, but apparently they don't mind cursing on this channel, because much like an HBO or Showtime show, this was littered with curses. It's executive produced by Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, which usually I like. They helped out with Arrested Development and some of that stuff. So thus far we have, I think, 3 episodes that have aired. And I don't know how many they've ordered for the season, but 3 have aired so far. Essentially, it's about the war, the current war going on, Iran, Iraq, that sort of thing. And nobody, I think, really, super famous is in it. I don't recognize any of these names. Gage Golightly, Sam Keeley, Christina Rodlo, Jeremy Tardy. I don't know any of these people, but I can tell you that this wants to be MASH, and very much is not. And from what I understand, the producers kind of set out to do a sort of MASH-like thing because they're trying to mix comedy with action and drama, and 68 Whiskey just doesn't work on any of those levels. And even if they weren't trying to make the MASH comparison, how could you not, as the viewer, watch this and think like, oh man, MASH did it way better? My issues with it are the following. For one thing, it's not funny when it's trying to be. Number 2, none of the women in the show have any real redeeming qualities. They're portrayed either as a whore or a bitch, or just kind of using people, or scheming. Like, none of them are portrayed in a good light, and then most of the guys aren't really portrayed in a good light either. There's a couple of sex scenes that don't need to be there. One of the first scenes we see is them having like a boxing match on site, and so that's sort of like, they're all betting on it. It's just kind of unseemly. I don't think it makes people in the military look particularly good, but it's also not funny. Now, some of the dramatic stuff works, I will say that, and the acting is okay for a group of people I've never heard of, but it doesn't have much more going for it than that. And I think another thing that MASH sort of had... Look, I mean, MASH is a great show, obviously, so it's easy to say, like, well, it's not as good as MASH, but it's not as good as, a lot of shows. I remember Fox had a military comedy maybe 2 years ago. This ain't even as good as that was. I forget what that was called, but but yeah, like MASH sort of had the benefit of having the Korean War in its rear view. I mean, this is talking about stuff that's going on right now, and I don't think it makes anybody look really good. The characters aren't that likable. So yeah, I mean, other than a few of the action scenes kind of working out, and I mean some of the action sequences are shot well, so it's not a complete waste, but I'm not sure if anybody's going to get anything out of this, and I think my guess is if you are in the military, and I never have been, but I mean I have family members that have served and are veterans. It just seems like they're just not being shed, in a good light, or shown in a good light, I should say. So I leave 68 Whiskey with a D plus. Easily the worst of 2020 so far, but the year is young. We've only delved a few weeks in, and like I said, I'm already a week behind from being sick. So next week, we're finally going to talk about Picard on CBS All Access. I'm very excited to see that as a big Next Generation fan. So we'll see where that takes us. And there's a whole host of other shows to catch up on. So like I said, I'll try to get these up every 5 or 6 days until we're kind of caught up to where we need to be. And next week, there's no new Connors episode, so it should be easy since I won't have to do that. The nice thing about not doing one of these new shows last week is I did put up the best TV of the decade, if you got to check that out, and also the best and worst movies of the decade. So check those out. They're longer form. They're like 2+ hours each. So they are a little bit of a hike to get through, but certainly worth it. I think some good conversations, some good lists. So you can check those out on the channel as well, and of course all the other stuff going on. Also, we're going to get back on the Dan Loves Disney train very soon. In fact, one of my friends, Tim, who guested way back in the day on Film Fanatics, has agreed to do some of the ones of Disney that Merlin does not want to join up for, some of the more musical-themed ones like Make Mine Music and The Three Caballeros. So we'll have some new Dan Loves Disney episodes coming up soon as well. But that will do it for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.